Welcome back to another FPL video and podcast. This will be the best team for Gameweek 38, so this will be perfect for those on the wildcard free hit. And even if you're using normal transfers or taking a hit or two, this video will serve as a template so you can identify the best players in each position to complete this season very strongly and get that green arrow, win your mini league, and fly up in those rankings. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you never miss a single upload or live stream, both UCL Fantasy and FPL. There will be more Champions League content towards the end of this month, so on the 31st of May, I'll be going live for the Champions League final in UCL Fantasy for match day 17 with those respective videos in the build-up as well. And for FPL, the content doesn't stop here. There will be my team selection, also a transfer tips podcast, and a deadline stream. If you want to see a reaction stream on top of it, then let me know down in the comment section below, and let's get this video to over 100 likes. Thank you very much for your support throughout the season, and to all the members, patrons, super chatters, we all massively appreciate, and also to Napstars and Paredes for gifting so many memberships in the recent deadline streams for both fantasy formats, and thank you for helping us reach many different goals throughout this season. 40 files will be the next big objective by the end of the calendar year, but for now, let's enjoy the end of this campaign and then move on to the next one in due course. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Over the past few days, my squad value has been a yo-yo. It's gone up and down, and it currently has actually increased to 104.1 million, and I have 0.1 million in the bank. But in terms of spending power, which you can see on websites like FPL.team, it does state that I have 102.3 million to spend on this 15-man squad. Now, on the free hit, if you are using that chip, or just in this case focusing specifically on one single match day, you don't need to have a stacked bench. Having one decent option is always nice, just in case someone misses out through suspension or injury or something like that. But I think it's all about the starting 11 here, and it's like the wild card where you would need that squad depth in future game weeks because we have nothing else to look forward to in this season. This is the last chance saloon, so invest all your funds in the starting 11 and you can minimize your bench with the cheapest options if you're struggling for funds. And let me know down in the comment section below what sort of players and teams you're targeting for the final game week of the season. But let's start off with the two goalkeepers, and we have one goalkeeper in particular who is chasing yet another golden glove. He could make it back-to-back in terms of winning it in the last campaign and now in this one. He's currently on 13 clean sheets for the season, and he had a great performance in Gameweek 37. Of course, I'm referring to none other than David Raya, who made 5 saves against Newcastle in that 1-0 victory, which secured Champions League football for Arsenal, and even second place should probably be locked off as well. Man City are the only team that can catch up to the Gunners, and they will need some massive victories to catch up on the goal difference as well. And I also think Arsenal will be right up there in terms of the clean sheet odds, which I'll show you in the deadline stream. And I think doubling up on that Gunners defence is a viable option, but Jurrien Timber is not one of those players you can count on because he will have surgery on his ankle, so he will be out for Gameweek 38, and even William Saliba is a massive doubt. And Arteta said the following: he was tracking back, he felt something in his hamstring, so we'll need to scan and see how it is. The Frenchman was subbed off at half-time on his 100th Premier League appearance for the club. So I think if you're looking for that Arsenal defender, Ben White showed some promising signs going forward, and he also grew into the game after a poor start. You've also got Calafiori, who will definitely be in that lineup if Saliba is out. Kivio has been very solid in Gabriel's absence. I still think the Brazilian has been missed, but Kivio's done a very good job nonetheless. And you've also got Skelly, who isn't classified as defender in this game, so you're ultimately limited to David Raya and then one of those 3 options I discussed in that defensive line. But you've also got Kai Havertz up front, who made his return as a substitute, Martinelli in the midfield, Leandro Trossard was subbed off due to an injury once more, but if he is available, you might want to go in that direction with 2 Arsenal attackers. But I think Raya is the standout in that defensive line, and he's probably the best goalkeeper from anyone you can choose in Gameweek 38. He is 3rd in the FPL rankings for points scored in this position, behind Sales, who is top, and Jordan Pickford. And Raya could claw the gap there and perhaps even go to 2nd or 1st place somehow in terms of points scored, but it's very unlikely, and you're probably hoping for a 6 or 7 pointer from the Spaniard. Now, the backup goalkeeper is going to be Areola. You can go even cheaper, to be fair, because Raya will definitely play for the Gunners, and he is looking to get another golden glove there. But Areola is a decent budget goalkeeper as your backup. He costs 4.2 million, and you might even consider Kilman in that defensive line, but West Ham have been terrible this season. They've been very inconsistent, and apart from Jared Bowen and Wan-Bissaka, I think the other players have definitely not performed to their levels on a consistent basis, and Graham Potter hasn't been able to get a consistent response from his team. They've had a few decent victories on the road against Arsenal and Man United, but on the whole, they have been very poor, and Areola isn't someone I'd start over David Raya. At the time of this recording, which is on Monday morning before the Liverpool versus Brighton game, Kieran Trippier is at 25% chance of playing, and I don't think it's as bad as it seems right now, because Eddie Howe said before Gameweek 37 that Kieran Trippier will miss the game, but for the final Gameweek of this season against Everton at home, there is still a chance that he will feature because it's not a serious calf issue. So I think Kieran Trippier could be a great differential, so to speak, and not many people would look to buy him on their wildcards, free hits, or with free transfers. So I think if Trippier is available, I'd highly recommend him, and you might even double up on that Newcastle defence against the Toffees. I think that's a very viable strategy. But if Trippier is still unavailable, I would just go to an Arsenal defender like Ben White, Calafiori, or Jakub Kiwior if you're struggling for the funds. Next up is Fabian Schär, who is a very underrated option in this defensive line. He can score goals from outside the box and also from set pieces. He has a bit about him there, and he will get bonus points if that's the case. So I think Fabian Schär is a solid choice here, and if Kieran Trippier is unavailable and you just want one Newcastle defender, then I think Schär is the next best in line, assuming that budget isn't an issue for you. Otherwise, Livramento is a decent choice, and Sven Botman was subbed off, I think, against Arsenal, but that wasn't injury-related per se. But I think Fabian Schär is the next best choice in that Newcastle defensive line. Next up, though, is going to be a budget option who is going to sit on the bench, and that's going to be Kilman. And later in this video, I'll talk about the starting 11 and the captaincy, but you might make a case of starting one of Areola or Kilman. That's fair enough. I just don't trust West Ham like that, and I think Ipswich Town will score in the final game in the Premier League for this season and maybe for years to come as well. But let's complete this defensive line with some enticing options that you're looking to start potentially in Gameweek 38. And one of them is Milos Kerkez. You might even consider Dean Howson, who is going to join Real Madrid this summer. So in his final Bournemouth game, he might have something to say with a goal and perhaps even a massive FPL return there with a clean sheet and some bonus points. But Kerkez is more likely to score or assist from open play, especially with the assists, I would say. And also in terms of accumulating those bonus points, that's something he will have over Dean Howson. And we have seen a massive difference between the two since Gameweek 30. Before that, Howson actually had more bonus points than Kerkez, but in terms of the form player in FPL, I think Kerkez has stood above the Spaniard here, and I would go for the Hungarian left-back, who is linked to many clubs as well this summer. But the fifth and final defender is another budget option who will probably sit on your bench, you could argue, but that is definitely down to you and your predictions for Gameweek 38. But I'm going for Nico Williams here, and you could go even cheaper to be able to afford other players in your defensive line. For example, Ben White or Calafiori to replace Kieran Trippier if needed. But I do like this defensive line overall. You would essentially be starting the Arsenal goalkeeper David Raya. You would have two Newcastle defenders if Trippier is available. And you could also go for Milos Kerkez. That is a very solid foundation. And you've got a great chance of a clean sheet. Also getting bonus points and some attacking potential from all of your defenders there. That definitely goes without saying. But in terms of other options to consider, it's really that Arsenal defence that I'd be honing in on. But you might be backing a clean sheet or some attacking returns from some defenders from other teams, like Ray Nate-Nuri, for example, facing Brentford. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But let's now move on to the midfielders. This position, as well as the forward line, is going to be completely stacked. And I think Bryan Mbeumo is one of those players that you usually say is a shoo-in, you just start him every single week, but there is a case to be made with this 15-man squad that he could drop to the bench, which I'll talk about in more detail later in this video. But Mbeumo is a solid player with penalty duties. Unfortunately, he missed one against Fulham in Gameweek 37, but he still scored in that game to deliver 5 points overall, and his consistency is something that really separates him from other options in this position. I think Jared Bowen is of a similar ilk, but one big difference maker between these two players is that Mbeumo has those penalties, and Brentford are also a better team than West Ham at this moment in time. Next up is Bukayo Saka, who hasn't been the same player since returning from injury, but I think it'll take him a little bit of a while to get back up to speed, and perhaps against Southampton, he can get some goal contributions and end this campaign very strongly. Now, don't get me wrong, Saka's done brilliantly to be available as soon as he has done, and a lot of Arsenal players like Kai Havertz have also had some very impressive recoveries, but I think we'll see the best of Saka next season at the very beginning after a decent pre-season, Arsenal getting some signings in and bolstering that attack. Saka's been carrying that team for quite a few years now, especially in that position, creating the chances, not just from set pieces, but also open play, and he has been scoring a lot of goals. And his goals and assist record this season has been very impressive, considering the minutes he has missed and some big games that he hasn't been able to be a part of. But he has made an impact in a lot of these matches, even in the Champions League against Real Madrid, and that wasn't even the best Saka that we've seen over the years. But these two midfielders are very consistent and quite similar in a lot of regards. Of course, Saka is significantly more expensive, but having both of them at the same time is something I'd probably recommend going into next season, but that does also have a lot of variables such as the prices they start at in Gameweek 1. They'll all be covered on this channel in the summer as well. But let's go to the other midfielders, and one of them is Jarrod Bowen, who has scored or assisted in 5 consecutive games. He's been absolutely brilliant for West Ham, and I know it might seem like I'm tripling up on West Ham, which seems ridiculous to be honest, but only one of them would freely start, and that's Jarrod Bowen. There's no doubt about that. You could go a little bit different and start Kudus and Bowen in terms of your free hit, wildcard, or bringing them in as part of a normal transfer. But I think Bowen is still the standout West Ham asset, and he's the one player I'd recommend from a non-Big Six club, so to speak, for Gameweek 38. He is even a contender for the captaincy right now with his current form, and the fixture is also quite complementary to that. I think Bowen has a high ceiling here, and he might even get a double-digit haul for the final Gameweek of this season. Next up though is an off-form player or out-of-form player who hasn't been performing for quite a while now, but he's on penalties just like Bryan Mbeumo and Saka, and I think the fixture is definitely enticing. So Kluivert does make it here, and you might even consider Semenyo, who has shown more consistency and also more returns in recent weeks. I don't really mind that as a differential punt, but Kluivert remains my preference because of those penalty duties, and I also think over the course of the season he has been scoring or assisting in more matches than Semenyo, who can be very frustrating at times, but maybe that is ownership bias there because I've had some poor experiences with Semenyo, to say the least. But the last midfielder is Template. I do recognise that, but I think he'll do very well in the final game of the season at home, and that's Mohamed Salah facing Crystal Palace. He will be a template captaincy option, I believe, and if he does well against Brighton, I think that's only going to increase tenfold. He is currently my captain for Gameweek 37, and for Gameweek 38, that is definitely pending, and it also does have a lot of variables, such as my final transfers, because that could also influence my final captain as well. But this midfield 5 covers 5 different teams, some of which, like West Ham, are very poor, but you still got that quality asset who is a talismanic figure for their club. You've basically got that in every single one of these players here. One of them might drop to the bench though, because the 3 forwards are really stacked and of high quality, and that's where we could have one of the biggest benching headaches of the campaign. Since blank Gameweek 29, Vissa's only blanked on 2 occasions, so he's getting goals or assists in virtually every single match at the moment, and he has been outperforming Bryan Mbeumo on multiple occasions. So I think going for both of them simultaneously is still a viable strategy. The only downside is that they're facing a decent Wolves side who have been solid defensively under Vitor Pereira, so you might want to trim that down to just 1. And in terms of differential forwards to really consider, I think Kai Havertz is one of them. He made a substitution appearance on his return against Newcastle, but he looked very rusty to say the least. But if you are backing him to start against the Saints, that could be a great option, and he scored in the reverse fixture earlier this season, probably his best finish in an Arsenal shirt as well. So I think Kai Havertz is a differential forward to at least take into account for the final Gameweek of the season. Vissa though is the consistent option that you can rely upon. He's got a track record, and I think he can perform against Wolves despite the fixture not being the best on paper. And Matheus Cunha from the same match is also another one to bear in mind, but I don't think there are many standouts in this position. I'll be quite honest with you there, and a lot depends on Alexander Isak's fitness. If he's available, I'd 100% recommend him. I know he's template, and you want to find ways of going against the pack and finding these differentials, and that's where Kai Havertz could come in. But I think Isak is still levels above And if he starts against Everton, I'd be very confident they'll get some attacking returns and be in the podium potentially of the best captaincy options overall. But we did get an update from Eddie Howe after the Arsenal game, and he said the following: unknown if he's okay for next week. He felt a bit of stiffness after training yesterday. He went for a scan as a precaution. A lot will depend on how he reacts in the next few days. This is linked to a groin issue he had earlier in this season. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of days, and any updates will be covered on this channel. But I have to be honest, I don't have that feeling we'll get conclusive updates before the deadline. So you're going to have to chance it, I think. You either go against the template pick of Alexander Isak and buy a differential forward like Evanescence or Kai Havertz, or you just stick with the Swedish striker and hope he performs. I think with the captaincy, though, this will probably put a lot of people off from captaining the Swede against Everton at home. But I did mention a name just there that I think is a great option for the final game week of the season. Evanescence is a differential with a great fixture on paper, facing Leicester at home, and tripling up on teams like Bournemouth, Newcastle and Arsenal is certainly a viable strategy. It does say I'm 2.9 million over budget, but that's only for someone who is starting FPL right now. You'll see using the website FPL.team that I've actually got plenty of money in the bank, and we could also get even more by replacing the likes of Trippier with someone like Kivior, for example, or you could even downgrade Isak to a Kai Havertz or a different forward like Cunha, and that'll give you plenty of funds in the bank, and you can use that to upgrade other areas in this team. Now, I've got a few budget options in here like Areola, Williams, Kilman, and you could go even cheaper in every single one of those areas if needed. But I think most of you watching will be able to afford this 15-man squad, and you can make a few upgrades actually. You might have even more money at your disposal, or you actually believe a few of these players just aren't worth including, especially in the starting 11. But let's now head over to FPL.team to discuss that particular aspect of this squad and also the captaincy, which is going to be very important in Game Week 38. Unsurprisingly, David Raya will be in goal facing Southampton away, and the back three comprises of Cher, Trippier and Milos Kerkez. The midfield is very solid in my opinion, with Bowen, Saka, Kluivert and Salah. Visser, Evanescence and Isak is the best front line right now, but that could certainly change if Alexander Isak is unavailable. And on the bench we have Areola, Mbeumo, Kilman and Nico Williams. So the thinking here is, if Isak is unavailable, you've got Mbeumo coming in and you can start 5 midfielders instead. Now you can also go for a different forward like Cunha or Kai Havertz or something a little bit left field, and that is certainly a viable strategy, but I don't see many forwards who really appeal to me in the same way that Isak does. But you might be feeling that Haaland or Marmoush will do the business. Maybe you back Mateta to score at Anfield. I mean, I'm not really of that opinion, to be fair. I know Crystal Palace won there last season, but it is a little bit different this time round. But I'm looking at the list. Chris Wood against Chelsea home is a good choice, to be fair, but he hasn't shown the consistency that he was earlier this season. But those are the real forwards I'd be looking at, I think. Chris Wood, Kai Havertz and Matheus Cunha, the ones that haven't featured in this final list. But Isak would still be the priority if he's available. The same goes for Trippier in that defensive line, as mentioned before. And you've still got that Arsenal spot available, so you can go for one of Martinelli or Trossard in the midfield. Maybe even Martin Odegaard, who has been getting goals and assists more consistently in the last 2 months, despite some poor performances in that time frame. And there's also a few other things you can do here or there, even in the goalkeeper position, which I probably wouldn't recommend. I think Raya is probably the best option there. But even with Bournemouth, for example, instead of Kluivert, you can go for Semenyo or go for Kepa Arrizabalaga in goal on top of Howson or Kerkez. So there's a few ways you can change things to your liking. Kudus alongside Bowen to double up on that West Ham attack. But I'm very happy with the 50-man squad, and that's the way I'd probably structure things. I've actually got 0.0 million in the bank, to be fair. So this is really running it tight, and you can make a few downgrades if needed. But with the captaincy, I'd currently recommend Mohamed Salah, and I'll talk about the final captaincy list in the deadline stream because there could be some changes. Just like Game Week 37, there isn't a particular standout in my opinion, but the vice captaincy is currently on Jarrod Bowen. I think he is right up there in the top 5 captaincy options for Game Week 38. He might even be in the top 2. That's how good he has been recently. And the only downside is West Ham, because they could have an absolute terrible game, Ipswich Town dominate, or create a lot of chances and put them under the pressure, and then Jarrod Bowen, as good as he is, might struggle to make an impact. But I think he will score against Ipswich Town, and he's a priority transfer for my squad in the final game week of this campaign. Other captaincy options include any of these midfielders or forwards in my opinion. I wouldn't recommend the defenders, even though you might feel that Kirkes, Trippier or an Arsenal defender are worth the captaincy shout, but I think apart from Salah and Bowen, I'd be looking at Isak if he's available, Saka, and probably Kluivert. I'd still rank him a little bit higher than Evanilson, but I wouldn't blame you if you think otherwise because the Brazilian has been more reliable in recent weeks and Kluivert has been a shadow of his former self. But this is the 15-man squad, the best team for Gameweek 38 for the wildcard, free hit, all with normal transfers. You might be taking multiple hits and just going YOLO, as they say in FPL terms. And I've got 2 free transfers myself for the final Gameweek of this season. I'll be discussing my plans for my final transfers and seeing what I could do to optimize my squad and finish this season as strongly as possible, rise up the mini leagues and the rankings, and secure a green arrow. I actually still have a bit of hope for Gameweek 37 because it currently isn't looking too great, but I've had a few decent returns there and it gives me a slight chance of a somewhat decent week here, and that'll all be covered in my team selection video and the deadline stream on Sunday. Be sure not to miss it, hit the notification bell, like this video, all that good stuff, and check all the links in the description below. That concludes the final best team video and podcast of this season. There'll be no more free hits or wildcards until the next campaign, but for UCL Fantasy, I'll be doing a very similar edition for the Champions League final going into match day 17, and on the 31st of May, that'll conclude all content for both UCL Fantasy and FPL with a final deadline stream of the season. Before we move on to UCL Fantasy though, let's wrap up this FPL season in style, win our mini leagues, get green arrows, and check out my Transfer Tips podcast, which will be headed your way, highlighting 11 players to buy, hold, sell, and skip. There's also my team selection, which is also on the horizon with 2 free transfers and no more chips remaining. And if you want to see a reaction stream for Gameweek 37 and 38, then let me know down the comment section below. And let's get this video to over 100 likes. So be sure to do all the usual stuff, sharing this video, commenting, liking, and subscribing. We hit 33,000 subscribers very recently, and it's all thanks to your support. The same goes to the channel members, patrons, and super chatters as well. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you this Sunday for another deadline stream, and keep your eyes peeled for more UCL Fantasy content.